Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much for having me. And so I've been at the Urban Institute now for about 20 years, so it's been a long time since I've looked for a job, and so I certainly did learn a lot from this discussion today. Hopefully I won't be looking for a job anytime soon, but one never knows. First of all, one thing we know is that the workforce is constantly changing. And that's happened throughout our nation's history. And today we see trends like increasing inequality in the workforce. So the gap in wages is rising between those at the bottom and those at the top. We see a shift away from traditional employment or employer-based kinds of work arrangements into more contract-based work. And we also see the growth in, and partly reflecting these trends, the growth in work at older ages. And that's really been one of the more dramatic changes in the past 25 years, just how many more people are working at older ages. And so this chart shows that. What I did is compare the yellow chart, the yellow dot there is the labor force participation rate in 1995. This is for men, and then the blue dot 2016. And so if we look at sort of the center of the chart, from ages 62 to 64 and below, you see big increases in the share of men who are working. So for example, 62 to 64, it increased over this 20-year period by about 13 percentage points, from 44% to 57%. Also big increases at 65 to 69. And what makes that, and also 70 to 74, we look at people 18 to 24, we look at people in their 20s, their 30s, and their 40s, and we see a slight decline in the share of men who were participating in the labor force. And what makes this even more dramatic is that between 1970 and 1995, we had a big decline in the share of older men who were working. So if you look at, for instance, 62 to 64, now we have the pink dot is 1970, the yellow dot again 1994, falling by about 30 percentage points from 71% back in 1970 to 44% in 1995. So this is really a remarkable change, and it's driven by partly by concerns about retirement security. In other words, the big increases. We saw a decline from 70 to 95 because we had employer pensions that were coming in, becoming more common, making retirement more affordable. We had increases in Social Security benefits, increase in retiree health benefits. All of those encouraged men to stop working when they reached 62 and around that time. Since 1995, though, we've seen a real contraction in retirement supports. So we see this movement to 401k plans, which means that many people just simply can't afford to retire, the erosion in retiree health benefits, and also that work has, in some sense, become a little bit easier for people. Physical job demands less common today than they were back in the 1990s. Older people are better educated today than they were 20, 30 years ago. And so all that has really promoted work at older ages. For women, we see the same sort of patterns, big increases in the share of women working at older ages from 1995 to 2016. And that reflects the same trends the same forces that were affecting men. But of course, the difference is that between 1970 and 1995, we had younger women really moving into the labor force. You can see that dramatically in 25 to 44, 45 to 54. And so in addition to what's happening for men, that there are these forces that are encouraging men to work longer, you also have, for women, the aging of this generation that had always worked at younger ages, and now they're older and they're continuing to work. And so because of these trends, and because of the aging of the population, we see that the share of the workforce that is older has increased, particularly at 55 and older. So this line here on the bottom is for the share of the workforce that's 55 plus from 1967 to 2018. And we see that in 1970, it was about, in about 1997, bottomed out at about 12%, and today it's about 24%, almost a fifth almost a fourth of the workforce is now 55 and older. More than half of the workforce today is over 40. So the older workforce is an increasingly important part of the nation's economy. And as I mentioned, one of the big changes in the older workforce is really education. So this chart shows the percentage of adults with a four-year college degree. This is in 1990. You see that if we look at men, in 1980, the last bar there, 62 to 65, about 12% of them had a four-year college degree. They were only about half as likely to have a four-year college degree as men 25 to 34. We look today, 2016, with the gray bars there, and you see that for men, there's really no difference at all across ages in the likelihood of having a four-year college degree. So that does make it easier, I think, for older people to stay employed and to get work. That is one positive development that is helping overall. Just the fact that there is this better education. The challenge, though, is that most employers wonder, well, if someone's in their 50s and their 60s and they went to college 30 years ago, 40 years ago, how relevant is that education today? And I think that is a challenge that people have to face. So what I want to talk about is, so we have a big increase in the share of the workforce that is older, but they still face significant challenges. And one of the challenges is that many people are forced out of their jobs before they're ready to retire. And so I recently completed this study with ProPublica that really asked what share of older workers separate from their employer involuntarily. That's what we're looking at for non-personal reasons. So we weren't really focused on health or caregiving or other types of challenges that people might face in their lives that would force them to leave work. But it's really kind of how often is the employer seem to be pushing people out, either directly, obviously from a layoff, or is it sort of more subtle kinds of things that might be happening in the workplace that are really pushing older people out of work. And so our research approach was to use nationally representative data. We followed workers surveyed in the early 50s until they reached at least age 65. And then we computed the share who actually had various adverse, who left the job for various reasons. And we really looked at those who said they left because of layoff or business closings. They had unpleasant or deteriorating work conditions. They experienced an unexpected retirement. And then we only looked at financially consequential separation. So it wasn't just that someone left a job and then bounced back, but these are people who left a job and either spent a long time unemployed, or when they did get a job, found work that were paid a lot less than their previous employment. And so our data from this national household survey from the University of Michigan, I won't go into the details about it, but basically we followed people from 1992 to 2016. And it collects detailed information on employment and earnings and income, and importantly, why did you leave that employer and when did you expect to stop working? And that question about when did you expect to stop working helped us to determine people who retired unexpectedly. So our measures, again, I said we're looking only at financially consequential separation. So that's people who were out of work for at least 6 consecutive months after they separated from their employer. Or those who, if they got a job within those first 6 months, their earnings were 50% lower than what they earned on the previous job. And so we look at these job separations. First, did you have a job loss or a business closing? If not, did you leave because you said, well, the work has become a lot more unpleasant than it used to be. The work conditions have really deteriorated. Did you say you retired, but it was unexpected in that 2 years earlier, you did not have any expectation of retiring within the next 4 years. And then we have to catch all of this other reason. And then we did look at involuntary separations for health and family reasons. And so this is what, and then we also focused on people who were 51 to 54 at baseline. So people who were employed full-time, full year, and they had been at their job for at least 5 years. So we're looking at this really kind of stable population here. We experimented with alternative samples, but it didn't change things a whole lot. But overall, when we look at that group of people who are who were employed in the early 50s, that's about 80% of the population, 51 to 54. So there is about 20% who weren't working. Some of them were retired, some were disabled, some were unemployed. But 80% were working, and most of them, 47% out of that 80, so more than half of that group were employed full-time, full year, for at least 5 years. Yes.
The year that you started your baseline, what was the unemployment rate?
So our baseline did vary a little bit. So we, if we looked at 1992, the unemployment rate was a little bit high because we were in the 1992 recession. So it was probably about 6 or 7%. Though some people, this survey, people joined the survey over time, and so some people joined the survey in 1998 when the employment rate was much lower. But you do have this, 30% unemployment is pretty low, at least for this sample. 3% of our sample said they were unemployed in that age, 51 to 54. And so what we found then was that 28% of our sample at some point experienced a financially consequential job loss or business closing. So 28%, more than 1 in 4. If we add in people who said they quit for bad conditions because their job got worse, it goes up to 41%. If we had unexpected retirements, it goes up to about half. So the bottom line is that we're basically finding that about half of people experience these financially consequential job separations after age 50. And in poor health, it goes up to 64%, and then it's up to about 2/3.
Which is this covering a broad period of time or just a snapshot?
Yeah, so it is covering a broad period. It's following people, over this. So everyone's followed to at least 65. If you dropped out of the survey, or if you were too young to reach 65 by the end of the survey, which we have data going through 2016, you're not included. So people are followed for at least about 15 years. So it's any time over that 15-year period did you experience one of these events.
And how many, was it one cohort? You said that people came in more than one time, so how was multiple cohorts or?
Yeah, so it's basically people from, because of the way we structured it, it had to be in the sample, and I guess some people could have been in the sample for as little as 12 years, because if you were like 54 and then you're 65, so I guess 11 years. So most of the people were from 1992 and from 1998, in that 51 54 age range in those 2 years.
So the most recent group it's 20 years on, so it's kind of a retrospective look, not looking at how are things happening today, I guess. Since all those people would be past retirement age by now.
Yeah, so and some of them were from 2004 because we had so that'd be 12 years, 2004 to 2016.
So there's another cohort.
So every 6 years, another group of people, 51 to 55.
So have you done any comparisons of those cohorts?
We did, what was surprising was how stable this number was across all those 3 cohorts. Suggesting that over this long period of time, even though something like the Great Recession, where unemployment rates skyrocketed, long-term unemployment, skyrocketed. Even before that, this was still pretty common. Even among people who were in their 50s in 1992, who reached 65, and so this would include we would follow at least at 65. So in someone in 1992, we would have followed them from 2016 for about those 26 years.
Interesting.
Am I reading it right? The bottom line is that 56% lost their job. The 56, that's the bottom line. I and under, so that's the cumulative. All the people who lost their job, employer related. It wasn't their choice.
Yes, that's right. It was right. So we're getting rid of voluntary quits. A lot of people quit voluntarily. They say I left because I got a better job, and those people were not included.
But these people who are in their 50s, I think of that as being in your prime of your stuff by that point.
But you're saying though, over in your study, 51 to 54, over half of that group that you studied involuntarily lost their job in that period of time.
At some point before they hit age 65.
at some point before we stopped following
Right,
them.
Right.
So they were followed at least to 65.
Yeah.
Some people were followed to 70, and so there were, if someone experienced one of these shocks at age 68, they would still be included in the 56%. So it's not just to 65.
Okay.
But most of them occurred before 65.
When you started the study, did you have any hypothesis as to where this would be? Is the 56, that's kind of where we thought it would be, or is that much
It's
higher?
much higher than I thought it would be. I was expecting more about a third.
A third, so.
What is it for the general working population?
Well, right. So that's a really good question.
I mean, because the one thing I'm noticing about the time frame of your study, there's a technology impact. And so when I think about, well, yeah, people are losing jobs because computers are taking over. Not there's almost a pre-assumption here that it's ageism. Is that what I'm getting from this? To find that we're all changing, but it's also because I'm going through midlife. It's not. It may look like it's an involuntary separation, but I'm changing what I want to do with the rest of my time on this earth. So even though it looks like the employer's letting me go, I think a lot of people my age, my friends, have let their employers go too. We're not passionate about that thing that we came out of college and had a whole career to find out it didn't. So it's just I don't want to assume that all of this is ageism, because I know there's definitely technology impacts for why people are losing their jobs during this time period.
Right. So what we do know is, to get to your question, I don't know how common this is among people 40, 30,
Yeah, right,
20.
the general population.
And that's because the survey is a survey of older people. And there aren't too many surveys that actually follow people over time like this.
Right.
So we have looked at other surveys that don't take quite as long a view as this, where the follow-up period is going to be 4 years, but that does include the entire population of all ages. And I'm going to show some of these results in a minute, but just to quickly summarize or to preview them. Basically, job loss is more common at younger ages than older ages, but doesn't last as long.
Yeah.
So, and everyone probably knew that before.
But the entire
But-
workforce and the dynamics of jobs, because it used to be you get a job for life, all that's out the window. So
That's
now
right.
people are 2 or 3 years in a career sometimes.
Yeah.
So there's so many things are changing all at once. It's tough to really narrow down if it's age or is it just the changing dynamics of the workforce or the work that's available to do.
Right, and as I mentioned earlier, we didn't see any big changes from the cohort 1992 to the cohort 2004. So it was pretty stable. So it's possible that if we had done this study for the 1970s, we would have found the same pattern. But we do know that there's more churning in the labor force now than there used to be. So I would be surprised if it was this high in the 70s. But that is still an open question. So this just very quickly, one thing striking is that this phenomenon is so widespread, and it's not just restricted to a certain demographic group. And so it's almost identical for men and women. There's little difference by race or ethnicity, and even by education. The less educated people are a little bit less likely than college graduates to experience it. So it's really widespread. And again, these people who had that kind of stable employment beforehand, they were in their jobs for at least 5 years, but it didn't really change much when we eliminated that condition. And then you look at sort of across the country, really not much regional variations. This is just showing this broad regional parts of the country. And we look at industries. Again, there's not really a dramatic difference. These services, professional services and the non-professional services, a little bit less likely to have experienced it. This is the job you had just before that separation. So this was the first job you had at 50 and 54.
What's fire?
Oh, I'm sorry.
insurance
Fire
and real estate.
it is finance, insurance, and real estate.
Okay.
Yeah,
And this is
but-
still looking at
good
the
question.
older work. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
This is still looking at older workers. That's the folks. Okay.
Yeah. So this part of it is all about people. 50
And it's by industry, not type of work. So if someone had a management position in manufacturing, they would be in that manufacturing category.
Right. That's right. Right. So that's manufacturing non-durable and manufacturing And so if we look at this chart now, which says, well, how many people after you left, how many got a job where they earned as much as they did at their old job? And you see it's only 10%. And you see that it's even lower for people with four-year college degree, because then they had the higher paying jobs to start with, than for those who didn't complete high school, and a little bit easier to get back to that old job because it wasn't as lucrative.
Do you have, sorry,
You go ahead.
okay. I'm guessing that people in that age range who already had a pretty good salary when they were separate, when they were in voluntary. Do you have any data on that?
Yeah, yeah, we're going to get to that.
Okay.
I may be premature in this. I just wanted to say that I feel like in my experience, job announcements and job hiring has become more narrow. And so if you had an expertise, it used to be if you were a lawyer, you could just get a lawyer job. And now all the job ads say you have to have at least 8 years of experience doing, employment and labor law. Whereas I was part of employment and labor law, but just one little part, and they want you to have done all these different areas of labor law. Or it might say the opposite. It might say we only want you to have done, equal opportunity or something like that. So it's like really hard for me to get to an interview when I haven't got that exactly specific thing that they say in their ad. And that's particularly true with the government. I don't know how it is. It's the same with some of the private jobs I've applied for, but it's almost like I can't get to an interview because they'll say, give me examples of these courses that you've taught. And I mean, I know the material I could teach if I was going to teach it. And I know more than the person who had the job before because I had like 30 more years experience than that person, but I just can't answer the question very well. So, I mean, I just feel like the jobs have gotten more specific in what they want than when I was younger.
And we do see, perhaps reflecting that, that duration of unemployment has been increasing quite a bit over the past 10 years. Spiked so much during the Great Recession, it hasn't come down much. The overall unemployment rate has come down, but the share of people who are unemployed for a long time is still moving up. Yes.
Do we know any characteristics of the people who are in that 10% who earn more versus the rest of the cohort? Were you able to find out anything about the people who bucked the trend?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we should probably explore more. We didn't delve into too much about the characteristics, and what we found was that there wasn't a group. There wasn't a certain a defining characteristic that would identify those people. But we didn't look that much at industry or occupation, or was there, but for example, it's not the fact that they have.
Well, I'm thinking like attitude.
Yeah, attitude. That's an interesting idea because this survey does include some attitudinal measures.
It does or doesn't?
It does.
Oh, good. Okay.
So that's something. There's a lot of in social science research. There's just increasing in economic research. More of an awareness now that used to be the case that we just kind of focus on human capital. We define human capital, which is how much education you had, and now there's a recognition in the field that attitudes and personality traits are important.
So you did some kind of personality profile questions, or at least a small.
Yeah. So I should say that this is a government-funded survey, so it's a large survey. So I didn't actually.
Not you personally.
Yeah. That's right.
Whoever did the survey.
Yes.
So you did.
Anecdotally, I'll say, in my experience, this happened to me once where I was unemployed for almost 4 years, got a job, paid more than I'd ever made, and it was because I was willing to relocate to Washington, where my skill set didn't exist. Whereas everybody did what I did was in New York where I was. So a lot of it has to do, I think, with following the labor market for your. A lot of people don't have that flexibility.
Right, and that's one of the explanations for why older people sometimes have trouble finding jobs is because they're not as geographically mobile as younger people.
Well, now I'm also finding when you're willing to be geographically mobile, they won't allow it.
Right.
They
Yeah.
screen based on if you already live there, or even if you don't live within 40 minutes of the job, but you're willing, say you're an hour and a half from the job, but you say you're willing to move to the other side of your metropolitan area, they won't interview you. So it's another way that things have narrowed. I've actually people who call me up and ask me, is this commutable? And I say, well, as I said in my cover letter, it's an hour and 20 minutes, but I rent right now, and if I get the job, I will move closer because I don't like an hour and 20 minute commute, but I have a car and I can start immediately. No interview. They actually call me to find, so it's another way in which they're narrowing the job descriptions. I find that you used to be able to move for a job if you wanted to, whether they were going to pay for it or not. Now they assume that you have to be paid to move, and they won't interview you.
I like what I'm hearing as a sub-theme of bucking the trend that we've been discussing today. I'm also reminded of an old slogan that was used by the Marine Corps. They were advertising the Marine Corps as looking, quote, for a few good men. Now, what that has to do with my individual job search is I try to remember I am one woman looking for one position. And that specifically, having been involved in 40 plus ever since I was 50 years old, which has been 20 years now, when I first started attending 40 plus, where I lost my legal secretarial position because the law firm went bankrupt in the year 2000. And through my continued association with the 40 plus program, I learned successfully how to navigate and work on my networking skills. So I literally got a job by networking in a very small DC office building that housed one law firm that consisted of 3 lawyers and 2 secretaries. I was working for a nonprofit that consisted of 2 paid employees, and me, I was doing contract work for the nonprofit. So, and a couple other very small shops on that one particular floor, and working for that nonprofit on a seasonal basis, I managed to be in the hallway and network with one of the 2 secretaries who was working for the 5-person law firm next door. She was on her way, quite frankly, to use the facility, so I didn't spend much time talking to her. But I did let her know that I was working for Ron and Susan on a seasonal basis, and I was really looking to continue my career as a legal secretary. 6 months later, this lady, Diane, who I was successfully networking with in the hallway of a very small office building, went to my friend Ron next door and said something to the effect of, about 6 months ago, I had a conversation with a woman, a blonde woman, short in stature, in the hallway of this establishment, and she said she's a legal secretary. Well, my colleague, the other legal secretary, quit after 25 years of employment. We're interested in maybe hiring this friend of yours. So
networking?
That can happen. 40 plus gave me the skills and, more importantly, the confidence to be able to do that.
Rich, is networking an important?
Thank you.
Do you have any data on networking opportunities, how people get?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of information on exactly how people become reemployed and about their job search activity. There's some other surveys that go a little bit into that more. But yeah, I wish we had some more information so we could get to that. But yes, question back there.
In your results in this chart, a number that stands out, surprisingly to me, I don't know if to you, is that Hispanics seem to have an exceptional ability to recover their full earnings. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, it really does jump out on this chart. So our sample sizes are small. And so this could just be, noise, exactly. It could also be the case, though, that that in our sample, the Hispanic workers, the Latino workers are earning less, and so they didn't, it was easier to get back to that level. But it's something that we want to explore more. Yes.
So obviously, this is a this can be perhaps a most daunting piece of data here that you're showing us, but it also, as some people have asked, I mean, if we can sort of maybe think about, well, what is it about the 10% that allowed them to recapture this level of compensation? So you mentioned earlier the percentages of workers at that 54% or something, roughly speaking, that had stayed the same over time.
That's right. So that sort of half of people who experienced this bad event was pretty stable over the period. Yes.
Is this 10% number the same over time?
Stable as well. Yeah.
It was. Okay. I was wondering. Well, that sort of negates my follow-up question, which was there was a huge growth in productivity, although it's, I guess, tailed off recently. But broadly speaking, over the whole workforce over the past couple of decades, and I wondered if that had any effect, a negative effect on this, where if people's productivity,
it's slowing the productivity.
Right, it's slowing, yeah.
Right. It's just something that you see so consistently, which is that when people, particularly older people, lose, people let's say 50 and older lose their jobs, their ability to recoup their earnings when they do become reemployed is limited, and it's we've seen it going back at least to, I guess I've looked at these data going back to the late 80s, and there was a phenomenon then too, and it do tend to be pretty long lasting. I mean, even when young people lose their jobs, I mean, sometimes these things do last for a while. They get long-term consequences of job loss, and it can scar younger people for the rest of the career, because you kind of get off, you sort of have this career trajectory, you lose a job, and you never quite get back onto that trajectory. It always sort of has a slightly lower trajectory. Yes.
I mean, I would think that would just be inherent in the nature of the hierarchical workplace, because there are fewer slots at the top of the pyramid. So you're moving up, and then it's either you keep moving up or you fall off, and there just are fewer spots available at a higher level. So I think that would be inevitable, that it would be more people would earn less than would earn more. Now, whether it can be 10% or it could be 30%, that I don't know. But I think that would be just at least a basic fundamental nature of the hierarchical workplace, and the fact that there are fewer slots at the top.
So here we're looking at the job losses that people experienced. So this was their annual household income before blue, before the separation, and after the separation in yellow. And this is again for that subsample who experienced one of these consequential involuntary separations. So in answer to Fred's question, they were making a lot. Their household income before the separation was about $94,000. This is the median, so half had more, half had less. And then it was basically cut in half almost, down to $55,000. So these really were, it's not like your spouse was, if for those people who were married was making up the difference, or these were pretty, this is just, you can see the differences by education there. If we look at, this is your income at age 65. So now we're showing your median income in blue is at 51 to 53, and then in yellow it's age 65. We look at people who didn't experience one of these separations. They basically were making about the same at age 65 as they were in their early 50s. And then those people who did experience separation, so again, they started off earning less than others, but then these people who So you know, they all end up with like $10,000 less at age 65.
But it's
so
interesting that even the people who never experience involuntary are making much less at 65 than they were at 50. So that's kind of goes maybe to what I was saying about, well, the pyramid kind of runs out of slots. So even those people had to take less
They had
money
the same
to
loss.
stay employed, it looks like.
yeah. So
Or is it a different cohort? Is that
no. So this is so basically what we're saying is that I think I might have misspoke here. So this is your median income age 50 to 53.
Right.
Those who experienced, those who didn't. Basically, they're the same.
Right.
So it was kind of almost like a random kind of.
But
draw.
the same folks.
And then both groups, because they retire, so you end up with less money because we retire at 65.
But is this their income, their final income prior to retirement,
No, this is their income at age 65.
including those who had already retired?
That's right.
Oh, so that's a different issue.
Yeah. So I guess the point here is
Because it would be
that-
interesting to know what was their final salary at when they were working to see whether
Right,
that
versus
would
income.
be.
Yeah. But then some people never went back and worked, so
Right.
that was kind of.
So
but here we're talking.
the chart on the left, though, is employment income. The chart on the right is retirement income plus any additional employment income. So you can't really compare the two of those, can you?
Yeah.
Well, they're both are total income.
Right, the
Right.
total, but at age 50,
Most
very
people are
few would
working.
be, very few would be retired unless they're
Right.
military or something.
Right.
But on the right, everyone's trying to retire, retired at 65. So they've got their retirement income plus working at the Walmart front door,
And the
for
gap
lack of a better way to say it.
And the
Right.
gap isn't as significant as
The
you
gap
would
is
think,
not
looking
as-
at the previous slide, which
Right.
showed like a 2/3 of income drop.
Yeah. So
you can,
you can interpret this as saying, well, there is this sort of retirement safety net that so you're losing
10 grand.
10 grand. So I mean, it's not a dramatic amount, but it's not trivial. And that's because of your
Whatever you may have
right,
saved
you
up before
right
that.
because you weren't able to accumulate as much Social Security, perhaps you weren't as able to save as much in your 401k. This is just income, doesn't get into wealth, so there's always that question about how one how one measures retirement well-being in a 401k world where not everyone is withdrawing from their 401k, and so how we sort of capture that is a little complicated. But what the chart trying to say is that that these losses, this job loss, does extend into retirement. The financial consequences extend into retirement, and so this is just showing the ratio of income at. So it's 55 income. It's age 65 income divided by age 50 income, and the blue is people who didn't experience the employment loss, and yellow is people who did. And you see basically that at age 65, the people who experienced this loss are their income as a share of age 50 income is lower. Not dramatically lower, but about 10 percentage points lower. And it's similar for men and women. And if you look at here, we're saying that we're seeing a bigger difference for Hispanics than for other racial and ethnic groups. But again, small sample sizes, not quite sure if that's how meaningful that is. And we look at education, a little bit more impact for the better educated folks and people who didn't complete high school. Another important phenomenon here is that many people don't experience just one of these separations, they experience multiple separations after age 50. So this is the share of everyone who experienced one of those shocks. 2/3 of them only had one, but 22% had two. In other words, 2/3 had one, but 1/3 had more than one. And so that's an important thing as well, that you could experience this more than once. We also wanted to look at, yes.
Is that rate increasing? Because, tenures in jobs are decreasing. So I would imagine that over time, if you continue following the study, these numbers are going to change with more 2s, 3s, and more.
Right.
Except that more jobs are not defined as permanent now than 10 years ago. So you don't really have an involuntary separation if they never considered you permanent to begin with.
Yeah.
But it is an involuntary separation if you want to keep working there. But
Yeah,
your
so-
contract or your temp or whatever ends.
And the way we counted this, if you said, I left because my contract ended, that would be considered an involuntary separation.
Oh.
Because the idea being, you wanted, presumably, we're assuming that the person wanted to keep
So
working.
those are included.
So those would be included.
And so does the data show any change in this response over time?
We haven't looked at this
Okay.
because the sample size is getting kind of small. So,
Okay.
So we just want to quickly look at, this is from a different survey. We're looking at it from 2004 to 2012 now, so it's the whole population. And so this is just the likelihood of ever being laid off over a 48 months, so 4-year period. And overall, 12% of people 25 and older experience that, but you see that probability does decline quite a bit with age. So among people in their late 20s, early 30s, 14% of them experienced it. People in their 50s, only 10%, and only about 6.5% for people 62 and older. So, a non-trivial difference by age. But if you look at long-term unemployment, so this is the share of people who were unemployed for 6 months or more over a 48-month period, a 4-year period. And there you see very little difference by age until you get 62. So people 62 plus, not likely to experience job separation. And this is just someone who was physically, they said they were either laid off or the business closed. So we're just looking at a narrower subset here. But again, you see people in their 50s, long-term unemployment is non-trivial. And then you see what is the likelihood of becoming reemployed, and this is controlling for other things. And you see the probability of becoming reemployed each year relative to people 35 to 49, that's 0. This is the marginal impact of age, and it's each additional year of age between 50 and 61 reduces your probability by 2.4% relative to someone in their late 30s or 40s, and then it's an additional 5 percentage point decline in the likelihood for each year at 62 and older. So you do see these big age impacts on the likelihood of becoming reemployed given that you've been unemployed. And then this chart is just showing what is for those people who do become reemployed, what is the median percent change in annual earnings. And so for people who lose their jobs 35 to 49, when they get reemployed, they're earning on average 14% less, half earning more than that, another half earning less than that, but 20% people in their 50s and 25% people in their 60s. So it is a big hit to your earnings.
Did you get into at all the people in the over 50 cohort, how many of those were actually, their goal was to recapture their earlier earnings? Because folks in that group, there's some of them might have switched jobs and not necessarily wanted.
Right. Yeah, so we weren't able to explore that, and that is true that some people just decide they want to take a different, they want to change their lifestyle, and they're willing to trade earnings for.
Any guesstimate how large that group might be within the?
So I've done some using other data sets looking at the consequences of the same thing, but focusing more on the reason why you left and looking at how job characteristics change. And so one thing you find is that people who change jobs after age 50, many of them do say that their job, they're earning less, but they say their job is less stressful. They say that their job is a little more meaningful. They like their job more. So you do see evidence of this trade-off at work, more at older ages than younger ages. It's interesting. Just some evidence on, this is the share of people who say that their employer favors younger workers. And so this is comparing the blue is 2002, the gray is 2008, and then 2014. And we see for men and women and everyone combined, big increase in 2014 versus the earlier years. People who say that their employer favors younger workers, about a quarter of people in this survey are saying that. These people who are employed. If we look at differences by education, what really jumps out here, this is people who didn't complete high school, and you just see that 38% in 2014 said their employer favors younger people, pretty stable for the other educational groups, high school graduates, some college, 4 or more years of college. They're all about between 22 and 24%. But the people who did not complete high school, 38%, so a big difference. But for all groups, we see a higher in 2014 than in previous years.
I find those numbers shockingly low.
That sounds like you would put yourself firmly in the 24% category.
I find that shockingly low.
Yeah, so these are people 58 to 60, 30.
And isn't that just a measure of whether people believe they're being discriminated against?
Or what they're observing.
Yeah, or
Yeah, the sense, I find it shockingly low.
These are people working though.
These are people who are working, right? So they're not the people who, you know, if we ask them 56%,
Right, they look at who they're hiring, you know.
It's easier.
It's easier to read them out, yeah, that's right.
But the fact that it's changed so much over time in a consistent direction would indicate there's something real going on here, not
Yeah, I
just
mean,
a
that's-
change in perception.
Yeah, it's a big change in
Yeah, but
very little time. It's-
the whole survey is structured around, this is, to me, this survey that you've done is almost a baseline, because isn't this the first time in the country's history where we've had such a migration of older workers as this time frame? Now, in 30 years, now they can see it, because there used to not be as many older workers like you showed.
Yeah.
So the discrimination may have been high for now during this period, but will it continue as the older workforce continues to make impacts? We don't know.
Right.
It's just because the change in the workforce that people are like, oh no, we're not used to all the Hispanics, oh no, and then you get it's an anomaly, the change, but once it becomes the norm,
There's fading hordes of older workers.
right, it may not be, look at these older world, right now, yeah, who wants a bunch of old people around them working? No, you got clammy skin, you know what young people say, but the truth is, once there's enough older workers in the workforce, will those preferences still be there? Will people feel biased against whether they are or not? You know?
So I think people have to go at 11:30, is that right? 11:30?
Oh, yeah.
So I don't want to, what is my time? So, we do see that people of color are much more likely to report age discrimination than non-Hispanic whites. And then this is just, so, what's interesting is I think we always had, the blue line are people 25 to 54, you see spikes corresponding to the business cycle. But back here, let's just say 1980, this is the yellow of people 65 plus. There wasn't this big increase in unemployment for that group during the recession of 84, during the recession of 1990, but then in 2004, 2003, I guess, and then we see some great recession, that the 65-year unemployment rate is really increasing. People 65 plus do want to stay in the workforce, and they're, in the past, I think, when they lost a job, they would drop out. Today, they're staying in and they're claiming that they are unemployed.
But in those earlier times, it was almost identical. There was no distinction.
That's right. And because back then, you had people who were working.
Fewer people were covered by Social Security.
Yeah,
that's probably
right,
because it phased in over
exactly.
time.
That's exactly right. So you had much higher rates of labor force participation for older people back in 1960 than you do today.
Right. So like what John said,
Yeah, I think so.
Are there any industries that are, or skill sets that are less prone to job loss and are better able to recapture their previous earnings? Are there some takeaways for people who are over 50?
Yeah, so when I mean, I do have a slide here that shows what these are the most common occupations for new hires, 2014 to 2018 for people 40 plus, with a college, who at least attended college, not necessarily completed them. I'm not sure there are any great surprises here. I mean, you know, these are also just big occupations. You know, a lot of nurses, a lot of teachers. And then for people who didn't complete college, we have this, these other groups. You know, a lot of very physically demanding. This is 40 plus. When you look at even 65 plus, you see a lot of physically demanding jobs in there for that are hiring, like janitors, and building cleaners, and maids, and housekeeping cleaners, and personal care aides. Very common, and those are physically demanding jobs. Yes.
Yes, very good. Thank you very much for all this information. I just want to ask, are you familiar with the SHRM survey they did in 2014? You know, SHRM,
Right,
Society
yeah,
for Human
right,
Resource
yes.
Management.
Mhm.
They did a survey in 2014. They talked to about 200 companies. Their question basically was, do you have any programs, internal programs, where you try to identify the mature worker? And of course they said no. But the questions went on to ask what they thought about, you know, the mature worker. And of course, they were very positive, you know, because once they hired someone in their 50s or 60s, whatever, that person was generally, well, they had great communication skills. They had industry knowledge of, you know, what younger workers would have. They were more dedicated to the job, more dependable. You know, they weren't necessarily looking to retire at 65. I mean, they're looking to reinvent and continue, you know, making that operation successful. So I think, you know, that's the message a lot of people have to understand, that when they're going out, talking with companies and they're a mature worker, that they can add a lot of value. And companies are starting to realize that more and more. And I think Barbara probably can verify that as well. You know, it's getting the message out there.
There's also the report of Susan Collins of the Senate Aging Committee on the older workforce, showing, you know, what's going to happen 15 years from now, and how, and I know from, you know, just personal experience, businesses that I'm involved in, they want somebody who reflects the customer base. I mean, I don't necessarily want to come in, if I'm speaking Urdu, I want somebody who speaks my language, perhaps even looks like me. And since the population is aging, you know, that's going to have a very important impact. I just have one other question. Have you done any work in terms of the sectors, but like looking at the healthcare sectors? What are the implications for the workforce, the older workforce? What about, you know, financial services?
Yeah, so we haven't actually, I haven't personally, and no one in Urban has really focused that much on sectors, but I mean, there certainly are big differences across sectors, and there are some sectors that seem to be, you know, more interested in keeping and retaining older workers than others that face some labor shortages. Yes.
I was going to piggyback off her comment, which is similar in that, you know, there are certain professions where there's just like a long band of education, so by the time you actually get your people at, you know, 40, like doctors say. And so, similar to that comment, knowledge workers or librarians, I feel like there's a band where their value increases up to a certain point that's well off into the 50s. And so how does that impact the leadership or senior leadership strategies? I feel like in that case it's more valuable.
Right, and you think that like there are certain occupations that require very specific skills,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe those skills, those technical skills might erode over time, and so you think of a technology job, maybe it's harder to get an older worker,
Mm-hmm.
that's not a very good fit, but then there are these jobs that require soft skills that you developed over time, and maybe there would be better chances of getting reemployed with those people with those kinds of skills rather than some obsolete technical skills. Yeah, you're right. Yes?
I have two questions. First, I want to say that it's very motivating to see the results of this survey. It is, I think it highlights several aspects that illustrate the value of the work that 40 Plus does. And then my question to you is, after we've seen today the evidence of the impact that 40 Plus can have with individuals that articulated what they are looking for, I think it's very clear to us, wow, what difference 40 Plus it makes. In this context, Richard, does your research inspire any aspect, any message that you want to give to 40 Plus as to what to do differently or in which direction to go as it looks into the future? And my second question is related to the survey that you made or that you work with in itself. as you give your talk to 40 plus, we're going through a conversation of to whom 40 plus serves. Does it serve disproportionately to any minority or group? I see in this group about 70% of women attending today. I do see some people of color. I think in 40 plus we would like to understand to what extent that is representative to the 40 plus public, and to see if we can use that to harvest funding opportunities. But we are uncertain about how to convey a survey. There have been concerns of, are we asking illegal questions? Are people going to be uncomfortable with us asking questions? And what is appropriate and what is not? Any comment that you might have there would be very valuable.
Yeah, so certainly the challenges, so there are older workers face challenges, and then other groups face challenges as well, and being older and an older woman and an older person of color, and maybe an older female person of color, those creates additional challenges, I think, in the labor market, and that's something that we see in the data, that it's just a lot harder to become employed to keep your job if you members of some of these other demographic groups. So I think it's really important to have supports for those groups, and so I think what you're doing is really valuable. I'm not sure that I was also inspired by people's discussions today, and I so often, my research is looking at these surveys, these impersonal surveys, and not sort of seeing the people behind the surveys. And I think your experiences and your personal experiences can guide my research, maybe more than my research can help you, unfortunately. But I think it certainly, from a policy point of view, I think the results here just say that the importance of strengthening anti-discrimination rules and laws, and that's something that Congress is thinking about, and something that we should push more for. I think also that thinking about more training opportunities and reskilling, but I think also just the kinds of skills that I guess you're really focusing on here, which is just how to find a job, because you haven't looked, many older people haven't looked for a job in so many years, and this has changed so much that I think that's really important. But yes, let me just do that.
So I'm wondering with the level of employability for 40 plus, if that has to do with the fact that a lot of older workers in the past time where there were job losses, who went back to school, and so they were re-educated, and a lot of the skills that they learned are probably more relevant to the current job trends that are happening now. They were able to kind of ride that technology wave as well. It's not so much that people got lost in that technology wave, but that they were also part of it. And the skills they had on top of those skills that they learned in college made them a more rounded person to be in the job force right now. Is there any evidence that indicates that period of time with those people that did pursue college? Because at one point it was there was a very high rate of colleges changed their structure to accommodate the evening student, because there were workers who needed to attend classes, in the evening time. So do your numbers reflect any of that at all?
Yeah, it's hard to know from my numbers, what's kind of driving that and how that trend might play out. We do see that not many people actually go back to get, let's say after 30, the probability of getting a college degree is pretty low. So I think we hear about it anecdotally, but it's not particularly common in the data. They have a lot of people going back to college, or you're going back to kind of getting any kind of training after age 30. Yes, it is very. Most training is on the job training, and it's not formal training. And formal education after 30 is rare. But that could be an important trend that we just haven't been able to pick up. Yes.
Could you flip back to the last slide?
Sure.
That. And also,
This one, or-
my question, yeah, just leave that up. That's that one. But my question is, this was billed as, and I know this is not the focus of your research, but this top was billed as what industries are likely to be hiring people over 40. So that's what I came to hear in case I could, do you have anything to say about what industries in general?
Yeah, so I do have, we have this slide, industries hiring most of these people who attended, so this is from the current population survey, and these are the 10 industries that hired the most 40 plus workers in 2014, 2016, 2018, so it's a biannual survey. So it's schools, it's construction, it's hospitals, computer systems design, restaurants, colleges, insurance carriers, real estate, outpatient care, and nursing care. So it's healthcare, it's education, and then it's restaurants and computer systems. But it's so broad. I'm not sure if it's that helpful to individual.
There's nothing there's no trend in other areas besides that.
Yeah, I haven't seen any, I would say no.
Okay, well, maybe if there's other questions, if Rich is on his way out, could address those. I think we should probably wrap up now and let people get on with their next thing. Interesting and very much food for thought. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.